everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm very excited. My name is Adam Penna. I'm here to continue the conversation in 3D printing and additive manufacturing. And today, I know the world out there has been very complicated for a lot, and we're all going through our individual challenges, but we're getting into the holidays now. And what a great time to start exploring, one of the things in 3D printing that is really kind of out there, but not talked about enough. And it's the food side, the culinary arts of 3D printing. And I'm very happy today to have Kyle von Hasseln, the Director of Culinary Technology at Culinary Printworks, and also the 3DS Culinary Lab in Los Angeles. And he's coming from Los Angeles today to talk to us. So Kyle, welcome. Very nice to have you here.
It's awesome to be here, Adam. I'm a big fan of YouTube podcasts, and I'm streaming all evening usually, so it's fun to be in this side.
Yeah, no, it's been exciting for me thinking about this because I know a lot of, looking at what's been happening in 3D printing and additive manufacturing, everybody's kind of pushing the envelope forward. And when you look at production, especially now when you're thinking about, people's taste buds and also appealing to them in a unique and individual way, it's very a customizable approach. And that's a really big power and benefit from 3D printing. But you talk about customization that you could eat and taste. Wow, that's exciting, and I got to give you kudos. Even the website itself, it looks yummy. It looks like you could eat the website. So do a very great job marketing and advertising. Yeah, so I know you've been doing this. This has been going on 8 years?
Yeah, you're right. Maybe closer to 10 because it kind of started while I was in graduate school with my wife in architecture school. That's where we got the 3D printing bug, so to speak, and just really became fascinated by all additive manufacturing technology. And I've been racing through it ever since that moment in architecture. Because as an architectural student, you get exposed to a lot of different additive manufacturing, and you can kind of look at them and get what you need out of them for models to kind of show clients, that sort of thing. Or you can kind of step into the space and think about how design and additive manufacturing go together, and think about building better machines to do different things. And so we really became captivated by that aspect.
Yeah, I've seen so many unique designs coming from Culinary Printworks, especially when you're looking at what's happening with different colors, textures, and shapes. I even saw some prints. I think on the website you have a banana peel. Is that Marilyn Monroe or someone like that on there? I mean, you have such wonderful artwork that is incorporated into what's happening. Not only the shape and the design, but then what can go on top of it and the whole look of it and the aesthetic. So it looks so tasty. I'm so glad I ate before this because now I can't stop thinking about the awesome food that you do print. So what exactly, the different kinds of food printing out there, can you give us a little bit of a history on how this all evolved?
Sure, yeah. That's a great question. And kind of I'll just say where we were kind of when we started, which is 2011, 2012, 13, which is probably when 3D printing was becoming more and more accessible to people, and prices of home kind of desktop printers were dropping. And I think that and the maker space was kind of blowing up. And I think it just put a lot of focus on the technology. So that's when I was in grad school, and that kind of illustrates the kind of beginning of my path. And my wife, Liz, and I decided to buy an old 3D printer, an antique Z Corp 3D printer, which some of your viewers may know is basically a powder printer, and it works by spreading really thin layers of powder and then basically wetting each layer. So you alternate dry powder, wet, dry powder, wet. And that's a way to build in a lot of architectural or construction settings, right? You could picture printing in cement that way, or possibly wood or epoxy and some other material. And what we realized right away is that we could print in sugar and salt. And the reason that we were doing that was actually kind of financial, to be honest. It was so expensive to buy materials for production level 3D printers at that time for us as grad students that we wondered, what kind of way to cheat here? Can we just use other materials? And basically none of them worked that well. And we realized a ton of engineering goes into it. But a bright spot for us was that when we printed in granulated sugar, it worked right away. It wasn't an A+, but it was above a C probably. And we thought, this is kind of interesting. And especially the photographs that we took of our models just looked gorgeous because the granulated sugar was translucent. And something about that really captivated us as artists. And it probably took months, to be honest, because I don't have a culinary background. My wife doesn't either. Like not at all. I'm actually not even kind of a foodie person, following like a lot of culture as like American culture, probably British culture too, follows cooking shows and stuff. But I'm just like a world outside that, just out of personal habit. And so it took months to kind of realize, well, actually, if we worked on this process, worked on a machine that was like completely food safe, wonder what it would be like to print essentially frosting and work with chefs in Los Angeles and kind of basically print 3D printed frosting for wedding cakes for them. Would they like that? And because I was a novice in the culinary space, I actually thought that pastry chefs would see this as food sciencey, as kind of like, tech taking over part of their domain. And I was really self-conscious about it. But what really shocked me, and it actually continues to surprise me until this day, is that pastry chefs who are at the top of their game are just really experimental people to begin with. They're also artists in their own right, almost to a T. And so they really reminded me of myself in a way, right? We would show up to meetings together to think about what to work on, and we both crack open a little notebook of drawings of ideas that we had that we wanted to work on together, ideas about color, flavor, that sort of thing. And pastry chefs have just always given us that response, and it's really like buoyed the company the entire way. Whenever we feel like a little self-conscious or a little worried that it's been taking a decade to get the technology in front of the audience, we remember that culinary artists really find this captivating, want to work with it. And so that's been important. And at that time in 2012, 2013, we saw that there were a variety of technologies for 3D printing food. There were some famous publications out of MIT and NASA. And when we looked at those, we were really struck, I'll sound conceited almost, but we were really struck by how like rudimentary the 3D prints looked aesthetically. And that was just because we were architecture students. So
Sure.
they were achieving this really important feat, kind of proving that you could 3D print with food and that it could meet certain requirements or goals for a certain setting. But to us, we thought, if it can only look like kind of okay, and maybe not really better than what a pastry chef can do by hand, because obviously they can do incredible work, just meticulous, gorgeous work by pulling sugar, by creating fondant flours. If we can't make it aesthetically like captivating, then there's kind of this whole avenue that seems like it's closed off. And so what we realized is that the powder printing Z Corp kind of space was a different platform, a different engine that would really give the technology a ton of potential. So in that moment, we saw that extruding kind of in FDM was really, really effective. You could work with pace, you could work quickly. And that's really important, I think, in research settings at graduate schools. For some chefs who are trying to like understand the limits of the technology, what it can do, even in like pharmaceuticals, probably near that space. All those research avenues tended to like pick up FDM and run with it because of its accessibility. And what Liz and I wanted to see was a kind of balance where the artistry of it was probably like the most important aspect, and to like not lose that. So we asked ourselves, like, what is the technology can do that? And that was powder printing. And your viewers are probably a little bit familiar with it, but I'll repeat again that when we're working with powder, right, we are taking, in our case, basically a concoction of different granulated and confectioner sugars mixed in the right proportions. So you spread a really, really fine layer. And when you do that, it looks almost exactly like you're printing a gypsum for a moment, right? If you're an engineer stepping into that space. And then over the top of that, instead of printing in monochrome, right, we've got 4 print heads arrayed above that bed, and they move across, obviously. And we have 4 channels. One's clear, and that lets us print like in white, because the constituent powder is white, obviously. And then we have red, yellow, and blue. And so we can color hundreds of thousands. It depends on how you think about how to mix colors, but we can print with maybe up to 1 million colors over every single pixel or voxel on that object. And that was just really, really important to us. We thought that chefs would find that valuable. Um, and so, yeah, I would say that that engine has been really important for us because it means that you can do, I think in that moment, we demonstrated a number of firsts. First of all, you can print really complex geometry because in a powder bed, you can have overhanging geometry and even parts that interlock. And that's because all that loose, dry powder that isn't wet when the layer is printed supports the rest of the printed object. Um, and you can also address color at every layer, like I said. Another great thing you can do is you can print lots of objects simultaneously. So if we have an XY plane that's like about 8 by 10 inches, you can kind of array little objects in there, kind of like a cookie sheet, and print that row of objects, and then spread a few layers of powder to separate it from the next row and print another row. So you can print lots of objects simultaneously. Each of those objects can be different in geometry and in color, which is wild. You can have complex shapes for the first time that are overhanging or interlocked or really highly perforated or have some other features that are difficult to achieve. And then the last thing, and the color is one, and then maybe the last is just that we can get really, really nice resolution. 3D printing is always pursuing like the highest level resolution. We don't necessarily look for that in culinary. It's not exactly important to the chef that it's like ultra precise. I think what's really important is that it's just a little bit more precise than what you can do by hand. So a lot of foods, like a bonbon or a small dessert that's presented to a customer, if you're working by hand, there's only so much resolution you can get down to because it's hard to, use the tools that you have or even your fingers to get that last bit of detail. But the printer can definitely exceed that. So for example, we could print, emboss or deboss font at about probably like 10 to 12 point font across the surface there, and that would be really difficult to do by hand.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome.
So all of those firsts just meant that that technology was really relevant to the culinary space, we feel.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I know that you've been dealing a lot with, like you were just talking about, that design to manufacture, but the design side of it, when you're dealing with these artists, because that's really where it comes into play, is these artists that are creating the food want to have their own touch, their own, special flavor. And it could be a company that wants it branded a certain way, but you're able to kind of achieve things that can't be done by hand with the help of the artist's eye and their talent and what they bring to the table. That's a nice pun in there. But yeah, it's really interesting to me. And that design part of it that you brought up, talk about that a little more, because I know this is all cloud-based. So how do you kind of bring along, say, the culinary artist who isn't involved with the CAD or anything like that on their design? What helps bridge that gap?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that we find that we need to just connect with the kind of chief culinary person that's involved in that operation to make sure that we're talking kind of one-on-one with the chef early on about their expectations. And it means we need to like learn about a lot about the chef, their customer, because our chefs all have a customer who they're hoping to appeal to, and to learn about the event that they're having. So by us knowing kind of theme, where the event is, what time of day they're serving, is this going to be dessert, is it hand passed, is it a wedding, all those different things are really important. That helps orient the designers a little bit, and then interviewing the chef about kind of what they would like to see the 3D print accompany at the event. That's really important too, and then that gives us a ton of information. So I think the way we probably think about it as designers is we need to know the application because we don't just 3D print. Well, it's really important to say that we don't really 3D print food so much as we 3D print an ingredient. And then the chef takes that 3D printed ingredient and collaborates, so to speak, or applies it or assembles it into the rest of the dish. So that 3D printed part is just one part of the kind of assembly and construction of the rest of that dish. And so we need to know the application. Is it dessert? Is it hand pass? That sort of thing. And what are the flavors? What are the colors and themes? And when we start to talk to the chef about those things and show them other examples, then we're starting to like speak the same language. And I would say that I think the best kinds of projects that we do with pastry chefs, which we get to do quite a bit of, are kind of projects where it's, as I said, integrated into a larger dish, but also probably it like interrupts the way that you serve or eat the ingredients a tiny bit. Those become really memorable and remarkable. So we've been 3D printing, for example, a lot of like 3D printed cloches, so to speak, which is like a delicate dome that rests on top of a dessert, for example. And that might be, we could 3D print in cocoa or raspberry or even salt or something like that. And if you crack that, right, first of all, it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
And it might be placed a la minute in front of a guest, and then they have that moment of like observing the dish, which is really special. It's difficult to know like even how that was constructed. And then it's interactive, so to speak, because they actually like break it and integrate it into the dish. And then you have the eating experience. So they kind of are interacting with the dish in a series of moments. And that tends to be more memorable, more
part of the experience.
Yeah, exactly. Part of the experience.
That's really cool. It just gets me, of course, it gets me hungry right away thinking about it. But you touched on one of the things that I was curious about, because you said, salts and sugar, and that's what you build with. So, and then you talked about a couple of flavors. So like what kind of flavors can you actually influence, or where do you see that happening the most? Like what are some of the more common flavors that you actually kind of add to or become part of when you're using this technology?
There's probably like two classes of flavors, so to speak. A lot of times when we're printing I just mentioned that like a lot of the dishes we do are kind of integrated into other ingredients, but we sometimes print standalone 3D printed parts that we think of as candy because they're just little beautiful ornaments that are candy-like that are meant to be eaten by themselves. And in that case, we use natural or artificial flavors, so to speak, and we kind of mix them into the powder and create that flavor. And in that sense, those are flavors. But then the way that we deliver any custom flavor for lots of the chefs that we work with is that we actually take the dehydrated food that they would like to be incorporated into the 3D print and grind that down or source it maybe from them where it's already like dehydrated and ground into a powder. And then we just mix that into the powder. And so in that sense, it's important to say that like that imparts flavor, but it's almost a misnomer because what we're printing with is the food, right? In the case of cinnamon, we're not 3D printing the flavor of cinnamon, we're 3D printing cinnamon. And so that's pretty cool because the technology is really readily accessible to almost any dehydrated food powder, which any chef knows is like actually almost any food can be freeze dried and dehydrated and then ground into a fine powder. We do that all the time in pastry. Like if we think about macarons for a second in French pastry, right? We think of all those beautiful colors that they have with the almond flour. A lot of times they're just titrating in basically any dehydrated food powder, and you can get like really geeky. And from a culinary standpoint, you think about like, okay, what was the source? So we could get carrots from a farm, for example, like a month in advance. Dehydrate those, grind, and put them into the dish.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
Deeply related to a time and place that's significant to the customer or the chef. And that's all completely available. So we can basically 3D print any food using this system.
Wow, my mouth's watering already thinking about this. Is good. So how? I mean, that'd be I couldn't work there, man. I'd eat it all. I'd eat it all the time. I'd be like, oh, this is great. Hey, look at this over here. Anyhow, get out of here. No, that's awesome. I mean, it's so, and I didn't think about that because I was just thinking about sort of the base ingredients, like you were saying, the sugar and then all the different things that you can, the foods you could dry and use those as the powder. Oh my God, it's endless possibilities. And then if you're talking about you have multiple print heads, right? So you could actually be combining different food ingredients, different flavors, different sweetness, different everything, and come up with a different palette.
That's exactly right. Except we don't put flavors, so to speak, in through the liquid channel. We do it through the dry powder channel. So
Gotcha.
I think of the whole printer a little bit as operating a little bit like a pastry chef, because you separate the dry ingredients, separate the wet ingredients, and the printer just mixes them really precisely. So from a culinary standpoint, we are really in a day-to-day R&D for any given customer, really working with the powder, and we will fold any of the ingredients we were just talking about into that powder, but we can do multiples. So we've got some pumpkin spice, edible 3D prints at Sugar Lab right now, available in the retail space. And those are, you know, a little bit of salt, a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of nutmeg to kind of conjure that pumpkin spice. So it's not a single ingredient, just like you said.
Yeah, and knowing all that, and that's all through the Culinary Printworks side, correct? Culinaryprintworks.com is where they could find all that. Now, there's the other side of it too, right? There's the Sugar Lab. Can you explain the differences between the two and what's happening there?
Yeah, probably the reason that we're almost speaking together right now in this moment in time is that since I developed the kind of concept for the printer, worked really diligently with 3D Systems and Brill, which are two other groups. So 3D Systems, large 3D printing manufacturing company, obviously, and software company, and then Brill, which is a large pastry provider, bakery manufacturer. And that 3D printer is available now. It's kind of for sale, and the first 3D printers will roll off the line any day now, probably.
Awesome.
And so what we've done in that time period is worked super hard to make sure that this basic powder printer concept is NSF certified, highly cleanable, highly reliable, and has a pretty big footprint. So we can print in about 8 by 10 by 8 volume.
Wow. Okay.
Lots of tiny little parts in there, maybe 1,000 parts simultaneously could be printed overnight, for example, probably over an inch an hour. So it's pretty speedy too. And that's all with, you know, printing color in real time. Nice. So that's a really sophisticated technology, and it's finally available. And my sort of feeling about the 3D printed world is that for a long time, or the 3D printed food space, is that it's been very like research based. Occasionally you see like a 3D printer for chocolate. I mean, these are amazing printers that people are developing, really cool business concepts, but they aren't really printing at a speed and an efficiency that is relevant to a busy pastry chef, right? To somebody running a convention center, to somebody running a restaurant.
Higher volume production.
Right? Which is really coincident with like a lot of the way that we experience food. It's at a pretty big scale, from a restaurant to a convention center to a resort. Those are all really big operations, and they need a machine that's, first of all, really high, reliable, can do high volume, and can do it again and again and again. So that has to be like a great 3D printer, and that's what we've built.
Isn't that called like a chef? What was it? The Chef Jet Pro, I think I saw. Is that correct?
It was for a little while. So when 3D Systems was building the technology by itself, it was called Chef Jet or Chef Jet Pro.
Okay.
And then we realized that to get it to market, it was going to take way more kind of understanding and expertise from the food and beverage and culinary space. And that's why I brought in the partner Brill. And,
okay.
And for the majority of the project, but even like the remaining, the last 3, probably 4 years, and they've just made the technology excellent, really understood the business, and they're the sole company that's going to distribute the hardware. So it's the Brill 3D Culinary Studio.
And how do you spell Brill? Is it B-R?
Brill, B-R-I-L-L. And so anyhow, now that 3D printer is available, I think that we will see it kind of enter the market in a lot of different places. One of the places that your viewership will know is that, of course, on-demand manufacturers are kind of often the initial force in a space that kind of brings the technology in, right? Because there's a teeny bit of reluctance when there's a new printer on the market, especially in a completely new space, like just to give an analog, like maybe jewelry or something. So in those first days, when there's a great jewelry 3D printer, it's probably a little bit expensive, the printer, right? It'll come down over time. But because of that, people are nervous to integrate it into their businesses on day one.
Yeah.
So what happens is, of course, on-demand manufacturers pop up. And that's where I step in. So Culinary Printworks is looking to be the premier on-demand manufacturer in the culinary space.
Gotcha.
And I'm sure that the people that are best in the biz will be able to buy that 3D printer and put it on the floor of their commercial kitchen and kind of get it going, work in their operations. But I think that'll take, larger companies to be able to do that, to have the resources to staff up and use it. But for everybody else that's out there or just wants to kind of try it maybe before they invest in the hardware, we're there to support them. And so that's what we do. But because the printer is completely new, as I just said, it's wild. Like, I'm not sure there is quite such an analogy in any other field where 3D printing has gone into, where like it's really at the ground floor. That's kind of wild, right? I think 3D printing in the medical space is pretty new and innovative, but that's like the old guard now compared to 3D food. This is just like the opening months, I think, of how this technology will be influential. So there are a lot of audiences to go out and talk to because it's never quite been done. So what we did is we set up the company as kind of two entities that work together. And it's Culinary Printworks, which is basically the professional side. We work with food and beverage directors, pastry chefs, marketing directors often. And they have, a schedule that's pretty far out, but it's really important. And they have minimum like probably 1,000 people at that event, and it's got to go well. And it's high pressure, and we work with those guys to make sure they have something just phenomenal to deliver into that setting. And then the other side is the retail space. And as far as I know, there's basically no 3D printed food in the retail space. It's very limited, but we think that we're able to print out volumes to make it really, really possible. So as a first project, what we're doing at Sugar Lab, which is sugarlab3d.com. I'm sure we'll link it on there.
Perfect. Yep.
But that's just like our online retail store. We're going to have a gorgeous catalog of products that range from little candies or mints to things you might want to sweeten coffee or cocktails or mocktails. Also, we're going to release pastry line stuff so that you could, as a home chef, if you were like really interested in this, you could we will be selling 3D printed pastry shells, essentially. Like some of your listeners might be familiar with, like, if you're at the pastry window, you might see like a chocolate molded shell, and then there might be a mousse or something inside that. Chefs rely on those shells all the time to accomplish a really complex, beautiful dessert. And so 3D printed pastry shells are basically a completely new concept, and they could be amazing. I mean, first of all, we can add color, which is really cool. Flavors, like I mentioned before, but they could also be more complex. And so that's going to be a really cool space. And we're working with a pastry chef in New York called Melissa Walnock. She's a professor at the Culinary Institute of America, and she's been taking our pastry shells and pipetting mousse and different kinds of cakes, and then baking that in an oven, and they kind of rise up like a souffle, and then you've got this cool 3D printed shell with a cake inside, and you can pick that up and eat it. It's almost as if you replace the paper lining of a cupcake with a 3D printed structure.
Wow.
That that rigidity to let a consumer kind of pick up and hold and manipulate beautiful objects. Cupcake can now be 3D printed, and that's really sophisticated because it could be perforated, could have baffles inside to hold different ingredients that you're pipetting in, all kinds of things. It's going to be really special. So yeah, that's it. We've got the Sugar Lab side and the Culinary Printworks side for consumers and for professional audience.
Yeah, that's great. And I understand that business plan on both sides. That's really nice. And I was thinking, of course, about all the things that I would love to eat, but then all of a sudden this question popped up in my head. Have you ever printed something that was so great you didn't want to eat it? You're like, okay, let's save that. Or I could imagine.
We do it all the time. It's crazy. We just 3D printed, well, I say just, but this summer we 3D printed little tasting kits for our investors and for chefs that had been following the project for some time. Basically a thank you, and sent them out. They had 6 little 3D printed objects, each a different color and different flavor, and suggested that, you know, they could drop it in a drink or integrate it into a pastry dish or just eat it as candy. And we gave them a little tutorial about how they could use it. And one of the most common things that pastry chefs told us is, these are too beautiful to eat.
Oh, wow. I bet.
We're admiring them. It happens all the time, actually. And I definitely take that as a compliment. And I know I've experienced the same thing in the pastry world, right? Like when you get macarons, like just having them sort of set out on the table is like, it's so gorgeous to look at that work. And also, if we think about pastry fondant flowers that are on a cake, like sometimes you're brave enough to go like eat that bit of flour when it's served to you at a wedding, but it's also like so beautiful you don't necessarily want to.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's so you know, it's a typical thing, and it's attested like the artistry behind it. You know,
Yeah.
there's so much that goes into making that beautiful design, and then you see it printed. The wonderful thing about 3D printing is it's repeatable, you know. So
Yeah.
if you got that design, go ahead and eat it. We'll make another one. You know, that's great. That's great. So yeah, I know it's been wonderful talking to you about this. There's a lot of great things happening. And how has your business been going through this time? I know a lot of people have had to change what's been going on. How has that been over this last now almost 8 months now?
It's impacted us. I would say kind of similarly to a lot of folks in food and beverage and in hospitality. So it's been difficult to see that. I mean, I've been close to a lot of pastry chefs and food and beverage and hospitality workers. And so to see their jobs be at risk and have all that uncertainty has been really, really difficult. I think that probably, you know, caused us to evaluate, you know, where is this technology relevant in the light of these environmental factors early on. And I think it probably put a little more pressure on us to go out and make sure we did Sugar Lab as soon as possible so that consumers can kind of have access to these, because even though, you know, things have been difficult for everyone for the last 8 months, to understate things, I think everybody's been kind of seeing that a surprise is that we're still looking for little indulgences and ways to kind of interact with people. So I could see that these Sugar Lab pieces would be fun to host really small events, or maybe send as a gift to somebody else. And they're in available, immediately kind of deliverable, fun kind of diversion and indulgence. And I think that that's important, and people are looking for that. I think there has been upticks in like some deliverable foods. So that's kind of interesting space. And then I think on the Culinary Printworks side, we're still seeing now pressure for virtual events, which is really interesting. We didn't really anticipate that, but there's plenty of hosted events. Probably a lot of viewers are familiar with that, right? You can now get like little kits or something that are sent out to each attendant in advance that might, I mean, it ranges from like little gifts that might be t-shirt or like information about the event, but a lot of times they're coming with like little gifts. And so Culinary Printworks or Sugar Lab can kind of deliver a little experience into there. And we're looking at doing some kind of tutorials at virtual kind of food and beverage events where we're a guest at that event, and we also deliver ahead of time that 3D printed ingredient, and we would have like a chef walk through how to prepare that. People can do that if they want to, or just kind of follow along. So there's definitely opportunities on both sides. We're just looking for them, and then also working on some long-term things. I would say if people are looking for signs of hope, it's out there in hospitality and food and beverage, because people are saying, you know, what's a deep 2021 going to look like, and how do we prepare for that and come back strong. And I'm on calls every other day with a group that's thinking about that. So, you know, light at the end of the tunnel.
It's a good sign.
Nice calls to be on when we're focusing on what it's going to be like to come back. So that's nice.
Yeah, that is nice. It's good to hear. Obviously, there's a place for it. I mean, my gosh, the artistry, The taste. I mean, when you can combine the two, it's a good deal, and it's so good to see you pushing that forward and seeing all these amazing designs and amazing flavors and different ways of incorporating that into a normal, workflow for a chef that's out there, and for also a service to people that can't afford to have their own machines or don't
Yes. Yep.
trust the technology yet.
Sure.
But even though you've obviously been improving it for many years, they can go through that service side of it. So both sides are wonderful to see in action, and I can't wait to taste some. So I'm going to have to get my head.
Sending you like a little tasting kit. We should do.
Oh, is that what that is? Cool.
Well, I just wanted to show you. This is what we got in the mail to you. So these are kind of what the tasting kits look like.
Wonderful.
A lot of times we send samples to our Culinary Printworks professional side, and then the Sugar Lab one has the Sugar Lab branding instead, obviously. And then you open that up, and it might appear backwards to the viewer.
No, that doesn't. That's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Hello, and break the mold. There you go. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. And on the back, we tend to do like a little bit of a menu
design.
What's going on? It reminds us of like the fun little key maps that you get in a box of chocolates.
Yeah.
Which I kind of love it when I was a little kid. It's like a choose your own adventure thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh my God, look at those. Yeah, that's just so beautiful.
The 3D prints. And I'm glad you think they're beautiful. I do too. And I mean, we think about like a part like this, right? Which
wow, look at that.
The gold colors might mask actually some of the leaves of this flower, and actually probably the viewers.
Gosh, it's gorgeous, and of course it looks so yummy. I'll take that. It's amazing. You don't have any peanut butter and chocolate in there. That's my weakness, peanut butter and chocolate.
Yeah, we should do peanut butter. We haven't done much of that. That's a great suggestion, actually.
I'll be your first customer on that. I love anything peanut butter and chocolate. I can't stop eating it. It is my my worst enemy sometimes, but I love it. I get so like I go for the organic stuff and try to fool myself. It's not the the big name brand stuff. It's the nice organic stuff, but it's still chocolate and peanut butter, buddy. Anyways, wow. So Kyle, thank you for being here. And I know I'm going to put a lot of links to everything we talked about in this conversation, but is there anything else you'd like to say while we have you here?
No, this has been great. Thanks for having me on. It's good to talk to you. And I'll just keep following the podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Let's keep in touch.
That's really impressive.
Yes, it's amazing that things are progressing this way, and it's wonderful to have guests like you, of course, on the show and be able to show some of the different aspects of what's out there. So
thank you. Happy to be on again. The next time we do it, we could probably do it like from the commercial kitchen. If people want to check out the hardware or something, we can figure out a way to put that together. For sure. Yeah, and definitely have to have some treats on this side. Exactly.
Yeah. Maybe that peanut butter and chocolate will be ready by then. Exactly. Well, cool, Kyle. Wonderful to have you here. You have an awesome day. And again, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, Adam.
All right, take care.